Is ready now.
I'm very pleased to have as our guest Mr. Maziar Baharai. It's a great opportunity to have an inside look and also understanding of the Iranian scene, which is intriguing scene, which is very complicated. So a view of insider or somebody who was of course born there and knows the language and the culture is I think an important opportunity for us, and I wish to thank Mr. Bahari who have found the time during his very busy timetable to spare for us this an hour, 2 hours in order to make things maybe try to make things more clear regarding Iran. Mr. Bahari is an Iranian Canadian journalist and filmmaker. He was a reporter for Newsweek from 1998 to 2011. Bahari graduated with a degree in communications from Concordia University in Montreal in 1993. Soon after, he made his first film, The Voyage of the St. Louis, in 1994. He has produced a number of documentaries and news reports for broadcasters around the world, including BBC, Channel 4, HBO, Discovery, Canal Plus, and NHK. Bahari's films include Paint No Matter What in 1999, Football Iranian Style 2001, and Along Came a Spider 2002, Muhammad and the Matchmaker 1994, Targets Reporters in Iraq in 2005, Greetings from Sad City 2007, Online Ayatollah in 2008, The Fall of the Shah 2009, and An Iranian Odyssey 2010. Bahari has been a jury member of a number of international film festivals. A retrospective of Bahari's film was organized by the International Documentary Film Festival Amsterdam in November 2007. During the 2009 Iranian election protest, he was arrested without charge and detained for 118 days. In September 2009, Bahari was nominated for the Prince of Asturias Award for Concord. Bahari's family memoir, Then They Came For Me, was published by Random House in June 2011, and more or less Mr. Bahari will talk today regarding his memoir of his arrest and the human rights situation as he's seen it in Iran. Please.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you, Sully, for great introduction. Most of it are lies on Wikipedia, so don't believe that.
It's from your side.
Is it somewhat? It's been hacked by Iranian intelligence agents, like anything. Well, some of you may ask, what am I doing in Israel? I'm currently making a film for the BBC about Iran-Israel relations, and the more I discover about the relations, I realize how little I know about Iran-Israel relations. But so I'm not going to talk about that subject, so we get that out of the way. I like to talk about what is happening in Iran, and I start with an introduction before getting into the book, and I try to wrap up my talk as soon as possible so I know people have questions, because the situation in Iran is quite fluid, and especially the conflict between Iran and Israel is developing phenomenon, and I'm sure people have questions, and I would be glad to answer questions that you may have, and if I don't know something, I just say that I don't know. So I think what's happening in Iran is a widening between the government and the population. This widening gap between the regime and the population is creating a vice. Imagine if you have a vice and you are putting pressure on the government, it is creating certain reactions in the government. So all you see what's happening in Iran, the nuclear program, human rights abuses, making the lives of these citizens, different kinds of citizens, Jews, Baha'is, nationalists, people, feminists, people within the government, miserable. These are the knee-jerk reactions or the reactions to this pressure that's like a vice coming to the government. And this vice is created by this widening gap. And there are four reasons that we can say that created this widening gap between the people and the government. And the main thing is that this information, this main reason, the main factor in this widening gap is information. In 2009, when people came to the streets and millions of people demonstrated against the government, against the re-election of Ahmadinejad and against the supreme leadership of Ayatollah Khamenei, people were asking me whether it's a class warfare or it's an urban versus rural conflict. And I said, no, this is mainly about people who are educated and know about the outside world and the people who are relatively to the other group of people ignorant about the outside world. They have education, they have formal education, but they do not have the grasp of the outside reality because of a variety of reasons, which does not have to do with class or the geographical area where they're living. So these four elements that I think has created this information explosion in Iran and the information, the education of the public. One of them is the fact that women, they've become part of the Iranian society much more than before the revolution. Before the revolution, we had a government that's maybe in a sense it was ahead of the society in general. There were family laws, there were certain laws that people, many ordinary religious traditional people could not really fathom and understand the reasons behind those laws. The family laws, they were much more progressive than many other countries. And that created a situation that many people in religious traditional families, they did not want their daughters, sisters, mothers to go into the society to be educated or become involved. And after the revolution, even though Ayatollah Khomeini started his movement, and many people don't remember that, Ayatollah Khomeini started his movement in 1963 as a movement against the women's right to vote and land ownership. So his first letter to the Shah in 1962 was about giving women rights to vote. But of course, during the revolution, women, they became strong supporters of Khomeini, like most of the Iranians. And after that, he could not control, of course, this great force. And he was a smart man. He could see that this is a force. And also, many families from traditional religious families, they understood that they felt more comfortable with new government. So they sent their female members of the family to be educated. And in the beginning, of course, this was not out of the goodness of the heart of the government. It was something to indoctrinate this half of the population. But the very fact that they became part of the society, the very fact that they became educated and took part in social activities, that created a situation that eventually, of course, and eventually I'm talking about 2 or 3 decades later, they resented the discrimination, they resented the discrepancies that they saw in the government and the society. The second factor that we can talk about is politicization of the clerics. As you know, there are at least 2 different views in the Shia seminaries, the Hawza, to religion. One, the first group, they are like Grand Ayatollah Sani, who is the object of emulation of people in Iraq, of Shias in Iraq, and most of the Shias all around the world. He has a great following in Iran as well. They don't believe Sistani, yeah? I said Sistani or Sani? I said Sani, no, Sistani. Sistani, he does not believe in involvement of clerics in in political activities. Of course, for Ayatollah Sistani, keeping the Hawza, this Shia seminary, intact, that is his main priority. That's why Ayatollah Sistani and his predecessor, Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, they worked with a number of Iraqi government. They worked with Saddam Hussein's government, even though Shia clerics, they were getting assassinated. Saddam imposed a great restriction, but they wanted to keep the Hawza intact, and they don't want to be involved in politics. But Khomeini, in 1963, of course, influenced by a number of other Iranian clerics before him, he started to politicize the seminary. And this was a very reactionary force in the beginning of the revolution. But again, I mentioned Sani, a new generation of politicized clerics, they became part of the system. And of course, they grew up, they matured, and they realized that the way that the promises of the revolution are not fulfilled, and they have to reform. So right now you see some of the most vocal opponents of the regime are among the clerics, including Sani, who I made a mistake talking about, and Grand Ayatollah Montazeri was the spiritual leader of the reformists, and I'm going to show you a piece that I did about him a bit later on. Another factor that really affected this widening gap are the free universities. And free universities are semi-governmental universities that have started in Iran. They were, in a way, it is started as a way to indoctrinate a larger number of people in Iran. And former president of Iran, Rafsanjani, who a lot of people have a lot of criticism against him, and I have a lot of criticism about him, but he really started the free universities. And right now, if you go to Iran, you see a free university branch in every city, in every town, even in a small village, you see a free university. So free university really created this widespread education, higher education to the great number of Iranians. And even though they wanted to start it as an Islamic university, they call it the Islamic Free University, because of the lack of resources, they had to refer to the previous textbooks, and they had to refer to foreign textbooks, especially in terms of the humanities. And when Ayatollah Khamenei, after what happened in 2009, after the re-election of Ahmadinejad, was criticizing about the state of the humanities, teachings of humanities in university in Iran, I think he was right, because a great number of Iranians, a great generation of Iranians, they were realizing that what Khamenei is saying is not right in the 21st century. And now they want to revert it back to, pre-Islamic time or whatever, and it's not going to work. I mean, this is too late. So the Islamic universities, they were very important. The fourth factor, I think, is the most important one, and that is really something that you feel around yourself as well, and that is the advent of the internet and satellite television. Up to, let's say, 1998, 1999, when most of the Iranians did not have access to the internet or satellite television, and right now they have access to television and satellite internet. And by having access, I don't mean that most Iranian houses, they have internet or satellite television. Most of them, I think, they do have satellite television because of there is no statistics about it. We cannot say what for certainty, but from my experience and observation, I think most of the Iranian houses, even though it is illegal, they have access to the to satellite television. The internet also There are different statistics about it, between 25 to 35%, again, because there are no statistics. But many families whose cousins, whose neighbors, whoever has the internet access, they are receiving that information from the internet. So even though they may not have direct access to Facebook or YouTube or whatever, they are exposed to that. So with the advent of the internet and satellite television, this widening gap between the regime and the people, it's sped up. And we saw the beginning of that in 1999, when students came to the streets and asked for more reforms, and they asked for resignation of Ayatollah Khamenei. And the Revolutionary Guards and the Basij paramilitary, they managed to crush that. But this movement went on, and in fact, while the government was crashing down the actual civil society, like the women's groups or workers group or students group, you could see that parallel groups were being created in the cyberspace. And these parallel groups, sometimes they were even more effective than what was happening inside. And with the Baha'is, for example, with the BIA, with the Baha'i International Institute of Higher Education, I think it would be much easier. And this is this Baha'i Institute of Higher Education is a network of Baha'i. It's a Baha'i network of education, basically, because Baha'is, a religious minority in Iran, they don't have the right to take part to go to universities in Iran. This informal system has been created, and it would be much easier for the regime to crack down the actual classes. But Baha'is, they're using the internet right now as a way to educate, and this system has been very, very effective. And also, you can talk about it in terms of the feminist groups, student groups. And what happened was that the combination of these forces that I'm talking about, they came to a boiling point in 2009. So I left Iran in 1986. I was 6. And then I went to Canada, and then I went back to Iran. And when I left, it was at the height of dictatorship in Iran, and it was a very claustrophobic atmosphere. And when I went back to Iran in 1997, it was a very euphoric atmosphere. So I continued to work in Iran from 1997 to 2009. I was going back and forth. I was making films, and I was tolerated because the regime somehow did not feel threatened by people like me. They did not know the threat of information. They didn't realize the threat of education. And we were under a lot of pressure, and we were self-censoring ourselves. I mean, a lot of us, journalists who went back and forth to Iran, we were self-censoring, and because we wanted to continue to work in Iran. But in 2009, when the population, they reached the boiling point, then the government, it was as if they realized that the situation is getting out of hand. They started to crack down, and in 2009, of course, as you remember, after the re-election of Ahmadinejad in June, millions of people came to the streets. And I'm going to talk about that reading part of my book later on, but I want to show you a film about Grand Ayatollah Montazeri that I did in 2005. And it was just a few days. Grand Ayatollah Montazeri was Khomeini's heir apparent, and I made this film. Some people in the government knew that I made this film. They were very unhappy with this film. They tried to hack the site that was showing this film, but I was tolerated. I was not imprisoned, or I was not harmed. So let's see the film, and we can talk about more later. This is another film.
They were heady times for Khomeini's heir apparent, icon of the Islamic Revolution, scourge of the Shah, a founding father of the Islamic Republic. Now he's the scourge of the regime he founded, Iran's rebel Ayatollah.
Until the government rethinks what it's doing to this country, the situation is really dangerous. God willing, they will reassess things and won't use Islam or the name of Ayatollah Khomeini as a justification for their deeds.
The mighty Montazeri's fall from grace was brutal. He had dared to question his old friend, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, and the direction the revolution was taking. For that, he was stripped of his inheritance, branded a traitor, and worse, a heretic. When Khomeini died in 1989, Montazeri, the idealist, was no longer in the picture, and another pragmatic but some say less qualified Ayatollah inherited Khomeini's mantle. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, to this day, Iran's supreme leader. Banished to a backstreet in the holy city of Qom, today Ayatollah Montazeri, now a frail 84-year-old man with Parkinson's disease, remains fearless.
It makes me laugh when I hear that the president says that we respect human rights in Iran. It is a joke. When they even deprive me of my rights, how can I believe that they respect other people's rights?
In 1998, Montazeri's office was ransacked by a violent mob after he'd again questioned the supreme leader's authority. No government can rule by the stick, he had said. Montazeri wasn't harmed, but his attackers sought to prove him wrong. Death to Montazeri, these graffiti read, casting him as an infidel. Execute the American spy, another one says. Montazeri was held under house arrest for 5 years. He remains under surveillance, but despite constant harassment of his followers and his family, he's now able to hold weekly classes for a small group of acolytes. He continues to rail against the government's crushing of dissident voices, among the most prominent, that of Akbar Ganji, a journalist who, like the Ayatollah, called the Iranian government an un-Islamic dictatorship that's betrayed the revolution.
I've heard that he has lost so much weight and his blood pressure is really low. There were no political prisoners during the rule of our Prophet, but look at the situation now. Mr. Ganji has simply expressed certain opinions and never took up arms against the government, but they have put him in solitary confinement and deprived him of any human rights. They have deprived me of my political rights, confiscated my property, and no newspaper dares to print a word I say. Is this what they call freedom?
In 1988, an armed opposition group based in Iraq launched an incursion aimed at toppling the Iranian government. It failed, but the attack gave Ayatollah Khomeini a pretext to purge thousands of jailed opponents, executed on his orders. Montazeri, whose own son Mohammed had been killed in a bombing by the very opposition group being targeted, wrote a series of letters to Khomeini describing the killings as genocide, incompatible with Islam. This, a copy of one of the letters with which his own fate was sealed, his downfall swift. Today the old man regrets many things, but not his defense of human rights. Once, holding a gun at Friday prayers, he'd led the chant, "Death to America." Now such slogans just irritate. As with many old Iranian revolutionaries, he's questioning his past. The USA, he says, is not the great Satan, and the hostage drama that conferred pariah status on the theocratic republic, a mistake.
I think it is wrong that we don't have any diplomatic relations with such a powerful country as America. I even think that taking over the embassy was wrong, even though I supported it back then. Occupying the embassy meant that we occupied part of that country. I'm out of power now, But those who are in power should try to find a diplomatic solution to these problems.
But the diplomatic art's an apparent anathema to Iran's new president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Yet for all Montazeri's disagreement with the current regime, he agrees with Ahmadinejad's views on Israel and his denial of the Holocaust.
Even if 6 million Jews were killed, they were not killed by the Palestinians. I have said exactly the same thing before. But maybe Mr. Ahmadinejad expresses himself more harshly. It is the United Nations' responsibility to compensate everyone in Palestine, both Muslims and Jews. There should be a referendum in which they can decide their destiny and not have Israel force its will on people.
And as to the explosive issue of Iran's nuclear intentions, well, the Grand Ayatollah sees eye to eye with the leadership on this one too, sharing the popular belief that Iran's being bullied by hypocrites, America chief among them.
Iran says it has a peaceful program, and if so, that's legitimate. We have an expression that when someone savors a date, he cannot forbid others to enjoy it. America killed so many people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki with nuclear bombs. And many other countries like Russia, Israel, Pakistan also have nuclear bombs. But now everyone says that Iran should not have it.
Montazeri turned his back on the revolution he started because he saw his Islamic utopia drenched in blood. Now he says he rejects as un-Islamic all violence, political killings, suicide attacks, nuclear bombs.
Of the 114 chapters in the Quran, 113 of them start with the words, "In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful." In the Quran, God tells the Prophet, "People follow you because of the merciful nature of God, and that if you are harsh with people, they will turn their backs on you."
Hossein Ali Montazeri believes they've been too harsh, and as he rejected his inheritance, so now he sees the children of his revolution rejecting theirs, turning their backs on what they've been bequeathed.
So as a journalist, filmmaker, sometimes you do certain things without understanding its importance. I think the interview I managed to get with Montazeri at the time, and the time that we did it, I mean, right now when I look back at it, I've looked at it several times in the past couple of years, and different people have referred to it. I think it's very symbolic of what was going on in Iran, not only what was going on in Iran, but also my own ability to be able to go to Iran, to make such a film, come out, being interrogated about it by the Iranian intelligence, and be able to convince them that, you know, these kind of films have to be made and continue to work in Iran. But of course, as I talked about it before, in 2009, after the election, something happened, and it was the fact that the regime, or by regime I mean the Ayatollah Khamenei and the people around him, they felt really scared. So they started to crack down. The Revolutionary Guards, they took over the intelligence apparatus. The people in the Ministry of Intelligence who dealt with us in the past, who interrogated us every, I don't know, 3-4 months or so, they were not in power anymore. because we had reached some sort of discourse with them. We were observing certain red lines that we can talk about later. And then the Revolutionary Guards came, and they had no clue about the intelligence, about what was going on in the world, or how to deal with the media. And I was reporting for Newsweek magazine and Channel 4 when the post-election demonstrations were happening. And and after the June 12th election, I continued to work for a week. There were demonstrations for 4 days, 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th, and then the 19th, which I think one of the most important days in recent Iranian history. Ayatollah Khamenei came to the Friday prayers and he told people to go back home, otherwise they would be crushed, and the fact that bloodshed will be the responsibility of the people, and the government cannot tolerate such thing. And on June the 20th, of course, I saw some of the most horrible images that I've ever seen in my life. And I'd been working in Democratic Republic of Congo before, Afghanistan, Iraq, and I had seen many horrible things. But I saw young men and women being beaten up with truncheons, young women being kicked in the face, and the Revolutionary Guards, they were just like, it was showing that how cruel they can be and how insecure they felt. And of course, the rest of the world, and I myself saw we can say the culmination of that day, which was the picture of Neda getting shot in the face. And I had been working for for a few weeks at the time, because I was doing a BBC Panorama documentary before that, and I didn't have that much sleep. So that night I decided that I have to go to sleep. I couldn't sleep, of course, so I had a half a bottle of whiskey at home, illegal whiskey, and I drank the whiskey and I went to sleep. And the next morning around 7:45 I was woken up by 4 Revolutionary Guards. I was sleeping in my mother's house, and they took me to Evin prison. Of course, they handcuffed me. They didn't show me. They showed me a faded piece of paper that they said it's an arrest warrant, and then they handcuffed me. They blindfolded me, and they took me somewhere. I asked them, "Where are you taking me? Are you taking me to Evin?" And they said, "Maybe yes, maybe not." So I didn't know where I was going, and we went to Evin. I could see the direction that we were going. We were going to Evin, and they took me to the interrogation room after maybe half an hour, 1 hour or so. And the first sentence, or maybe the second sentence, was that, "Mr. Baharai, you are charged with espionage." And I asked, "Which organizations?" And they said, "Israeli Mossad, British MI6, American CIA, and Newsweek." So, I there and then, I realized that this is dangerous. This is something that I have no control over. They don't look for information, and there might be a scenario. I never knew what was the scenario, but I realized it later on that the Revolutionary Guards, they had a plan even before the elections, that they wanted to incriminate the reformists by connecting them to foreign powers, especially the United States and Israel. And they wanted, and Britain, of course, and they were looking for a certain people who were working with foreign governments or foreign countries, and they tried to do that through them. And one of those people, he was Hossein Rassam. He was the political consultant to the British Embassy. Another person, Kian Tajbakhsh, he was an urban planner. He was working for George Soros's Open Society Institute, and he was supposed to be the NGO contact. Hossein was supposed to be the diplomatic contact, and I was supposed to be the media contact. So throughout my time in Evin, like in the first months, I had nothing, there was no question regarding my own activities. It was mostly about which reformists I put, like, who gave me the order to make this film about Montazeri, for example? How did the CIA tell me that I have to make a film about Montazeri? I had made another film about Ayatollah Sane, who gave me and I did a report I had an interview with Khatami. And, it was all that. So they were just throwing charges, baseless charges after baseless charges against me. And it was just very ridiculous. I'm going to read you a passage from my book. The book is very emotional, so I'm not very personal. I'm not going to read that because I get very emotional myself. I'm going to read something that's fairly amusing. I mean, it was not amusing in the interrogation room in prison, but with the hindsight, it can be amusing. And this is another charge that that was thrown at me. So the Islamic Republic, they're quite smart. They ask someone to arrest you, that person becomes your interrogator, and then when they release you, that person haunts you and says that if you do anything else, I'm going to get you. I never knew the name of my captor, interrogator, so I called him Rosewater because of the smell that he had. And it's funny because I was in the Baha'i Center today and I hadn't smelled rosewater for a long, long time. I was like, okay, Baha'i Center. It was not the... it was just a bit of a shock. So, in the interrogation room that night, Rosewater was not alone. The man he was with, a man whose voice I had not heard before, complained about my taknevisi, the answers I had written about my friends and acquaintances. When he came closer, I saw through the crease in the blindfold that he wore shiny, polished black shoes. His trousers were neatly ironed and creased. Mr. Baharai, your answers are very general. We hope that you can give us more details, he said. He sounded more mild-mannered than Rosewater. I just write what I know, sir. If I were to give you more details, that would mean that I would be lying. Well, said the Rosewater, who had been fairly quiet up to that point, we have some interesting video footage of you. We think it may persuade you to be more cooperative. I could not imagine what he meant. They had confiscated many videos from my house, as well as external hard drives with the unused footage of 2 of my films, one about AIDS in Iran and another one about an Iranian serial killer who had murdered 16 prostitutes. Although both films were banned in Iran, there was nothing in them that would incriminate me in any way. I saw the flicker of a laptop screen through my blindfold. Then I heard someone speaking. It was a recording of another prisoner's confession. "Oh, it's not that one," said the new interrogator. "It's the one marked Spying Coffee Shop." Before the elections, Tehran had a vibrant cafe society. Young men and women got together, their green bands fastened around their wrists, talking about the campaign and what they planned to do after Mousavi was elected president. I spent a lot of time in different coffee shops in Tehran conducting interviews in order to get a sense of what young people were thinking. Perhaps they had filmed me at the time, speaking to friends. This worried me. I was coming to understand just how ruthless these people were, how willing they were to believe their own lies, to construct their own version of the truth. I worried about who else might be imprisoned somewhere in this building behind these impenetrable walls because of my reporting. I was immersed in these thoughts when I heard the voice of Jon Stewart from the Comedy Central's Daily Show, and then that of Jason Jones, a Daily Show correspondent. For those of you who don't know what Daily Show is a satirical show that's shown on American television every night. I wish we could see it now, but apparently the computer doesn't have a flash drive, but you can see it online. It's a very good show. They make fun of things. It's a comedy. Everything's fabricated. Everything's made fun of. And I had an interview there. Then that of Jason Jones, the Daily Show correspondent. What is it that makes these people evil? Jones was saying. I hadn't signed up for Twitter, so the only way to find out was to go and see it for myself. No, I thought. They can't be that stupid. Among the hundreds of journalists from news organizations around the world who had come to Iran to report on the election was a team from Jon Stewart's satirical news show. I had met Jason, his producer Tim Greenberg, and their translator Mahmoud about 3 weeks before the election. Over a few cups of Turkish coffee, we discussed the situation in Iran, and Jason asked if he could interview me on camera in a coffee shop. Jason was going to pretend to be a thick-skulled American, and their goal was to present an image of Iran different from the one typically shown on American television. I agreed, and for the interview, Jason wore a checkered Palestinian keffiyeh around his neck and dark sunglasses. He pretended to be completely ignorant about Iran and eager to find out just how evil Iran was. Introducing me, he joked, he goes by the code name Pistachio. "Why is this American dressed like a spy, Mr. Baharai?" asked the new interrogator. "He's pretending to be a spy. It's part of a comedy show," I answered. "Tell the truth," Rosewater shouted. I couldn't believe it. He honestly seemed to believe what he was saying, that a spy had come to Iran and filmed me for a segment that had appeared on television. From the way he was speaking to me, I drew the conclusion that he was acting tough to impress the other man, who I assumed to be his boss. "What is so funny about sitting in a coffee shop with a keffiyeh and sunglasses?" he demanded. "It's just a joke, nothing serious. It's stupid." I was getting worried. "I hope you're not suggesting that he's a real spy. Can you tell us why an American journalist pretending to be a spy chose you to interview?" asked the other man. "We know that you told them who to interview for their program." I had given Jason and Tim a number of names of people I thought they would be interested in. Others, Jason had interviewed the former Vice President Abtahi and a former Foreign Minister Yazdi, had been arrested a week before me as part of the Revolutionary Guard's sweeping crackdown. "It's just comedy," I said, feeling weak. I asked them to listen to the content of the interview. In it, I said that Iran and America had many things in common, like fighting drug trafficking and Al-Qaeda. At the end of the interview, I concluded that George Bush's infamous statement about Iraq, North Korea, and Iran being part of the axis of evil was as idiotic as Iranians going around and burning the American flag. Rosewater pulled a chair and sat in front of me. "Keep your head down," he said. "Do you think it's also funny that you say Iran and America have a lot in common?" I had to give a careful answer. "Sir, all I'm saying is that Iran needs America for its security as much as America needs Iran for the security of its troops and its interests in the region. We are living in a world where nations cannot live in isolation and prosper. Aren't we all interested in the prosperity of our country?" "Why do you care about U.S. interests?" asked the new man. "Don't you know," added Rosewater, "that Imam Khomeini called America the Great Satan?" They didn't let me answer. The Imam also asked, "Why do we need to have a relationship with America?" Rosewater's boss said. "America cannot do a damn thing," Rosewater said, repeating one of Ruhollah Khomeini's favorite phrases. It was as if the two of them had been rehearsing this anti-American rant for months. They seemed to be enjoying it. "Do you know why you told the spy about common interests between Iran and America?" asked Rosewater's superior. He seemed to have an answer ready, but I had to defend myself. I thought of my father, who could communicate with anyone. "These men are weak, Maziar," I heard him say. "Appeal to their emotions, gain their sympathy." "Sir," I began, "many people die in plane crashes in Iran because of the Americans do not sell spare parts from old Boeings to Iran, and Iran has to buy worthless, defunct Russian planes. It saddens me to see many of our compatriots die every year. We are an independent nation. Having relations with America doesn't mean that we must be American slaves. Venezuela, Syria, Russia, China do not agree with the US, yet they maintain diplomatic relations. And sometimes they even cooperate with America. I advocate an equal relationship between Iran and the United States, a relationship based on mutual respect." "And you want us to believe you," the boss said. "Mutual respect," Rosewater mocked me. "Mr. Baharai, the only reason you're searching for a common ground between Iran and America is that you want to find a way for them to infiltrate our country." The boss concluded. We have kicked them out. We have kicked them out through the door, and you want to bring them back through the window. Rosewater added, finishing his thought. Ahsant, bravo, well said, Rosewater's boss declared. Bravo for what, I thought, for being a brainwashed moron? Rosewater finally said, tell America to be angry with us and die of that anger. Do you know who said that? Yes, Martyr Beheshti, I said. Mohammad Hossein Beheshti was the first head of Iran's judiciary after the revolution. Anti-regime terrorists killed him and several other officials in a bombing in 1981. I knew Beheshti's family. His son Ali Reza Beheshti had been a Mousavi advisor for years. I had met with him a few times during the campaign. He'd been arrested a few days before me. I find it ironic, I added, that you quote a statement from the heyday of the revolution while you have arrested the son of the man who said it. The ridiculousness of using the Daily Show as evidence against me gave me enough courage to argue with my interrogators. With all due respect, revolutions like people have to grow up, gentlemen, I said. Rosewater was taken by surprise. He grasped my left ear in his hand and started to squeeze it as if he was wringing out a lemon. As the cartridge tore, I could feel the pain, like a slow fever, inside my brain. Rosewater let go of my ear and then whispered into it, breathing heavily. Didn't you hear what the judge said? It felt like my ear was broken. I am your owner. This kind of behavior will not help you. Many people have rotten in this prison. You can be one of them. Mr. Baharai is wise, the other man said. He will soon realize that it's in his own interest to cooperate with us. The man with the creased pants said something else to me as he left the room, but I didn't hear him. My ear was ringing with pain. So this situation went on for 118 days, and they basically went from ridiculous to more ridiculous. It was never sublime, and then they just they were throwing these charges first, and then they moved into my personal life. They went through my Facebook contacts, Yahoo contacts, emails, telephone numbers, and they were asking what each person, especially the females, and they wanted to know if I had sexual relations with them, and if I had 2 numbers for one person or 3 numbers for one person, they would be certain that I had sexual relations with these people. And they included like prominent people like Shirin Ebadi, the Nobel Prize winner. Like, why do you have 4 numbers for her? You must have had sex with her. So, I have 10 numbers for Ahmadinejad. We get to that later. You were spying for that. So, so that is the situation that, we can, it's amusing to me with the, when I'm outside of Iran, but a lot of our friends, my friends are suffering in this situation. Many people who don't have a voice, many people whose names are unknown to the rest of the world. People don't know who they are. And I was very lucky that people knew me, people outside of Iran knew me, and they campaigned for me. And that's why I'm here. That's why I managed to come to Israel. But a lot of other people, they're suffering that. So on that happy note, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much. Yes, we are open to questions. Yes, please.
Do you think there is a chance that the opposition will be able sometime in the future to overthrow the regime without help from the outside?
Well, it depends what you mean by help from the outside. We have different models of outside help. If you mean something like Libya, there's a chance for it. If you're talking about the help that opposition in the Soviet Union received, that's possible as well. And I personally prefer that kind of, the second kind of opposition, and especially
the model of 53.
Pardon?
The model of Iran 53.
No, that's not possible, and it's a very complicated situation. You're talking about the coup, a CIA coup. That's not possible anymore. But in the recent history, we have 2 models, basically the Libyan model or the Soviet model. And I think that if Western governments and the allies, American allies and Europeans, they really want to help Iranian people and for their own long-term interests. I'm not talking about short-term interests, long-term interests. They have to help Iranian people to be able to communicate with each other. They have to create an infrastructure for Iranians to be able to mobilize themselves. And these are very, realistic things, pragmatic things to do. And I always say that, if the Western governments could not communicate with the Soviet citizens during the Cold War, it was because there were very few media available to the Soviet citizens, shortwave radio or leaflets. And that was very easy for the Soviets to seize and intercept. But right now we're talking about internet, satellite television, and the Iranian government simply does not have the resources to jam all the satellite transmission all the time, to shut down the internet all the time. I mean, they're thinking about creating this national intranet, but who knows? I mean, in a few years' time, you can have internet satellite. Right now, you can't do that, and I think the Western governments should really emphasize on that. And they're talking about it being expensive and costly, and I always say, okay, how much is a warship cost? How much is a tank? How much does a tank cost? A tank costs about $10 million, but then you can put that $10 million for the tank into research and development of satellite internet, and that can help the Iranian people and the Americans and the Western interests and Israel much more than tanks and military invasion.
That's a point that repeatedly comes up when I speak to young Iranians. What do you need? They say satellite connection. That's what we need.
That's what we need. Yeah,
To
because they can
the
mobilize themselves, they can educate others, they can be in contact with the rest of the world, and the Iranian government is afraid of that. And although the idea is not sexy enough, bombing is much sexier than satellite television or satellite internet, it's very short-sighted to have that, be verbalized, that kind of rhetoric. Yeah.
You want to ask?
We learn from history that the revolution doesn't start if the economic situation is good. From the French Revolution till the Egypt Revolution. What do you feel about
it? I think you're right, and I think one of the reasons that the 2009 elections could not, even if they had taken over the Free Azadi Square in Iran, Tahrir Square, like Tahrir Square, or it wouldn't be able to succeed, was the fact that the Iranian government at that point, and even now, manages to provide the basics for people. But they are running out of resources now. Iran is a very rich country, but they're running out of resources.
Right.
And soon, because of the sanctions...
They export most of the oil to China.
Yeah, but at what price, And they're buying a lot of stuff from China. So that's, that's the thing. I think the sanctions are biting. I think the Iranian government is feeling the economic bites of the sanctions, and I think eventually when workers who are not getting their salaries, farmers who cannot pay, sell their products, and most importantly the people who are living in the outskirts of the cities, who are the most vulnerable people in Iran economically, and who were the most influential even in 1979, if they cannot provide for themselves, because they are people in the margins of in the outskirts of the city, they are walking a very tightrope, and they can always fall off, and that's, and the opposition has to be very careful about how those people react, because that can result in a bloodshed, that can result in a clash between the people and the government thugs. And I think as you said, I don't think that anything can happen until the economic situation is
I
not.
think
Yeah.
what I see now, they export oil to China. China export to the whole world. The money go wrong.
No, I think that I mean China. I don't think that they're buying the majority of Iranian oil, and also a lot of 22%. Yeah, Mary knows these things, and 22%, and also a lot of it is not. I don't think that it is they're receiving cash for that. They're receiving dollars. They're receiving a lot of help. They're receiving technical know-how. For it, and
Low
it's, they
quality
barter.
products.
Pardon?
Low quality products.
Low
also.
quality products, and that it causes Iranian manufacturers to shut down, and that can have economic effects. So it is. I don't think that selling oil to China is the solution.
Mayor,
Two questions. If you could tell everybody about how the people of Iran. Soli and I get asked this question all the time. We would love to have your input. How does the average Iranian, even though it's as difficult as it is to describe the average Iranian, see Israel? Number one. And number two, speaking for myself, and I think I speak on behalf of all Iranian Israelis, for us, war between Iran and Israel is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. To me, it's like my parents beating each other up. It's the last thing. Of course, we don't accept what the Iranian regime is doing. You know everything, calling for Israel's elimination, calling Israel's virus, everything else. The question here is, we can't deal with Iran diplomatically. Only the United States can. The more I read history, the more I realize that there have been several presidents after Khamenei who wanted to have relations with America. But Khamenei did not. Khamenei does not want to have relations with America. I think, and please, I'd like you to correct me if I'm wrong. Please correct me. I think the reason why he turned down Obama's offer of 75% and went to the Brazilians and the Turkish instead was because, number one, he did not want a deal with America. Number two, to make Obama look weak, because if he would have had a deal with Iran, it would have boosted his position. How do we get to that? How can we bring the Americans to deal with the Iranians, to find a way where Iran can have the energy it deserves and it needs, and we here in Israel can live in peace knowing that these guys who interrogated you and did all these things are not making a bomb?
Well, I think the average average Iranian does not think about Israel on a daily basis. Iranians in general, the ordinary Iranians, don't have any beef with Israel. Their lands are not occupied by Israel. They've never seen an Israeli on face to face. They don't feel any threat. So they regard Israel as a concept. Some of them as a negative concept. Some of them as just an irrelevant concept to their daily lives. That someone has 3 jobs and has to work in an office in the morning and then go work as a cabbie, and at night does some accounting on the side, and that person does not really have to think about Israel and its threats. So that's one thing. But there are some people who hate the Jews and hate Israel. But again, many of even those people, when push comes to shove, they don't really care about Israeli-Iranian relations because there is no real conflict. So that's just the Iranian-Israeli conflict is really a fabricated conflict that was created by Iranian government in order to legitimize themselves. And I think if Israel did not exist, they would have created something like Israel. I don't know, maybe populated by Colombians or something. I don't know. You're Colombian, okay? How did I come up with Colombians? Yeah. Peruvians, whatever. So it is just something that they would have created some other imaginary enemy. So that's one thing. But I think the rhetoric coming out of Israel at many a time, I think it plays in the hands of the Iranians. When I'm saying a lot of things that you will see on television next week. They just did an interview with me for Channel 10, I think, Israel. And I said all this. When Netanyahu or his members of his cabinet, they say that Iran is an existential threat to Israel, that's like a music to Ahmadinejad or Khamenei's ears, because that boosts their ego that, we can be an existential threat to this invincible force that defeated Egypt and Syria and the United Arab forces and all that. Iran is not an existential. Iranian regime is not an existential threat to anyone.
But
It's not. It's to itself, to the regime itself, not even to the Iranian people. It's a very weak regime. It is a regime.
Get access to the bomb.
Pardon?
Even if they get access to a bomb.
Even if they get access to a bomb, Soviet Union had how many bombs? Did they manage to drop the bomb on Kiev or Moscow or St. Petersburg? They did not. The main fear of the Iranian government are the people of Iran. The foreign threats are solidifying the people within the government. What I think that Israel should do, Israel should be as quiet as possible, and should make the Iran's nuclear program, which is a real problem for the international community, portrayed as as a threat to the international community, not an Israeli problem. I think the Israeli politicians sometimes, as I've heard it from from Israelis, that what was his name? Amos Yaldin? Yadlin, yeah. Who said that sometimes they are fabricating this Iranian threat in order to get extra budget or something. Isn't that what he said? I think that's what he was saying. That he said something like that. To that, yeah. So that is possible, and I think that's very short-sighted, and I think that's very counterproductive to do something like that for the short gains. So I think that Israel should be really helping the international community. I don't think that Khamenei will ever talk to the United States under normal circumstances. As American diplomat John Liebert always says, Iran doesn't feel a pressure. It feels a lot of pressure. So there has to be a lot of pressure. I think the sanctions should be even tougher on the nuclear program, on the Revolutionary Guards. There has to be human rights sanctions. There has to be cultural sanctions. But on the other hand, I think sanctions, the reductive sanctions, are very easy to do. I think there should be positive, proactive exceptions to the sanctions. For example, when you have sanctions of the banking sector, it doesn't allow Iranian importers to import anything because they cannot get letter of credit to import drugs, pharmaceutical, technology, or even spare parts. So I always tell the Americans and the Europeans that you have to have proactive sanctions. That you go to the banks and say that, okay, you can, or the exporters can send drugs to Iran, and they say it's very time consuming again. It's, if you want to bomb the country at one point, if you're at a virtual state of war with the country, you need to win their hearts and minds as soon as possible, and you cannot let the situation deteriorate and then win their hearts and minds.
Yes, please.
Regarding the Jewish people in Iran, if the situation is too bad, why they don't leave Iran?
Ask them, I don't know.
30,000.
I'm not Jewish and I don't know.
10,000.
I will explain to you afterwards. This is not in no, really. I will tell you afterwards.
I don't know. I mean, and one thing that I can tell you, and I've asked some Jewish people in Iran, is that
During your,
this is our
stay
country.
in Iran, you did not see people or Jewish people?
I mean, I didn't see all of them, but I talked to some of them, and they told me that this is our country. We don't want to leave it. And when you talk to, I mean, I was in Holon yesterday and on Saturday, and I talked to a lot of Iranians in Holon, and they were saying that we miss Iran. We want to go back to Iran. That's our country. They are not absorbed in the society. They feel comfortable in the country, so
And they can visit Iran.
they cannot. Yeah.
Not anymore.
They can, one-way ticket maybe.
One-day ticket. Yeah.
I have. Oh, please go ahead.
Khamenei is not a young man anymore. Are there any preparations for the day after for
$1 million
somebody.
question. Believe you me, there are a million. That's it.
No one has any answers to that. But the thing is that when Khomeini died, no one had answer to that question either, because Khamenei was not, an obvious candidate. Montazeri, who was the obvious candidate, had resigned a year before Khomeini died, and then they were talking about the council of leaders. Right now, no one even thinks about it, and Khamenei,
Your
like
student
most
is writing
of the,
about this, right?
yeah.
No,
Yeah, the student is actually doing a paper on this. Well, what?
you have a student who's writing?
No, your
No,
student.
I had
The
a
one
student
who
who was
approached me.
writing.
Yeah. He
Well,
was
I think
doing a
Mujtaba
paper
is
on it.
actually appearing more and more in the press. Parsine yesterday published
Yeah.
pictures of him. He's becoming more and more visible.
Mujtaba is Khamenei's son.
Mujtaba's coming.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that Mujtaba is. There's a problem with the Iranian opposition, that their opposition to Khamenei is exaggerated. One thing that's different between Iran and there are many differences, but one of the main differences between Iran and other Arab dictatorships is that Khamenei has been very careful about his image among his supporters. He's financially clean. He's not allowed his children to take part in financial activities, and there are lots of rumors about them being involved in this, but no one has any proof. And I have some inside information that there are people who see him as this clean island in the sea of corruption, which is, I think, is wrong, because he breeds corruption, he tolerates corruption, he creates corruption around him in order to create loyalty. So when Iranian opposition, they don't want to really think about the situation and analyze the situation, they resort to cheap tactics, and they say that Khamenei's son is going to be his successor, and he's being groomed to be his successor. I don't think that the Revolutionary Guards, they really need a supreme leader to legitimize themselves after Khamenei. So maybe they just get rid of the position. They get rid of the position of the supreme leader. But there is no real candidate. Maybe Ayatollah Mesbayazi, who loves to be supreme leader, maybe he become, but he's not a young man either. So he's actually older than Khamenei. So there are no, but Khamenei is in good health, so don't worry about the day after. No, for now, yeah.
I want to ask you a question. Make it last one, because you have been up and working all day, so we don't want to go too much on you. If you compare the Iranian case, mainly 2009 events and 1999 as well, we compare it to the events in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
You see the government using much harder force against the population. Still, the population are keeping it up, and you see people every day killed. I'm not, of course, for killing, but it seems to me that in the regular pace, it will take, I don't want to say ages, but much longer time in order to see a true change in Iran. And if we compare events or the situation today in Iran with the situation in 78, 79, it's much worse than what it was in human rights, in economy, whatever aspect you take.
Yeah.
The situation is much worse. So how would you explain through the visits that you have, and you sense it better than us, why the Iranian people don't go the further mile, they say? Or no?
There are a couple of different.
Is it something cultural? Is it
I can think of at least a couple of reasons. One is that in 1978-79, people had a clear alternative to the Shah. They knew that they didn't want the Shah. It was a very traditional religious society, and they felt disenchanted with the regime they had, and they wanted to have a religious government power, and there was a clear candidate for replacing the Shah, who was Ayatollah Khomeini. People risked their lives to bring Khomeini to power. At the moment, there are certain there are different
The Shah was
developments.
sick also. The Shah was very
Yeah, the
sick.
Shah was sick, didn't know what to do, and also what Shah did, which Khamenei has been very careful not to do, is that Shah really created a system around him because, I don't know, that his father came to power with the coup, he himself came back with the coup, that the Shah created a really weak army, an army that, just gave up before him. But Khamenei has grown the selection of very strong revolutionary guards who are really loyal to him. And they believe in his spiritual leadership, and because they believe in his personal qualities. The Shah did not have that, Mubarak did not have that, Ben Ali did not have that. So there are people who are going to die for Khamenei and who are going to stay with him until the last day. There is another one, pardon?
And kill for it.
And kill for him, yeah, when you die for him. And the other thing is that Iranians, because of the experience in 1979 and because they're reminded of that every day, they don't want to die for anything. When I see the scenes in Syria, people dying like that, it really scares me, because when you die for something, you're also willing to kill for something. So Iranians, they respect their lives. They don't want to die. And they don't want to risk their lives in order to have an ideal government. Because, first of all, they know that the government is not going to be ideal. And they know that, they know what the experience of 79. Until, as you said, economic reasons can push people to such desperation that it's going to create this chaos that people are going to die because they have no other choice. That has not happened in Iran. The situation is not as desperate as that. Also, the Iranian government, why it's not killing people, it's not because that they love people and they don't want to do that. They know that they can reach their goals through intimidation and harassment much more than killing. Because what's happened in Syria, for example, that, I have journalist friends, and I see Syrian opposition who go to certain areas in Syria, and they say that the government does not have any control over that it's the part of the army that are controlling Syria. With all the signs that we see that Bashar al-Assad most probably will fall either this year or next year. So what has the killing really has not helped Syria, and what it has created is this disaffection, disenchantment among the Syrian army, because people are killing their brothers, they're killing their cousins. They see, their and they don't want to continue that. The Iranian government does not want to exhaust its resources by killing people, and they also know the value of martyrdom in Iran. When people say that Neda was killed on purpose, I always say no. The tragedy is that she was killed by mistake, and anyone could be killed like her. And the regime is very careful not to create martyrs, because they know that even the opposition is Shia, and they have this martyrdom. They can use martyrdom as a symbol. And Neda is the clear example that one person who got killed, and people had damage, she became a strong rallying point for the opposition.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
We wish you a happy stay.
Thank you.
And a successful one.
Merci.